So can you all see my slide? Awesome. Well, good morning again. My name is Carolina La Rosa Mateo. I'm an independent consultant. And today with me here is Becky Stewart, who is part of the management team for the Improve Group. If you're not familiar with the Improve Group, they are an evaluation consulting cooperative based in Minnesota, and they are the evaluation support for the MW's programming. So that's how we know Cody and how we're connected. And today we're going to talk about evaluation, specifically what it is and how to use it. So for today's session, we'll cover just like a high-level description of what evaluation is about, some reasons why we evaluate and how it can benefit your work, a little explanation of some common tools, and then just a brief discussion of where your interests are and what would be more helpful in the future, what information you're seeking. So, if you have anything else that kind of comes to mind, we'll have time for discussion at the very end. But if you have questions throughout, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we will do our best to answer them. But before we kind of get into the meat of the conversation, I just wanted to get a sense of who's in the room with us. So if you could please share your name, your role, and an answer to the prompt on the screen. So if you happen to not be looking at the screen, the prompt is when you hear the word evaluation, how does it make you feel? What does it make you think of and why? And as you can see, hopefully we have a little sheep scale for you to pick from to show how evaluation makes you feel. And all the answers are welcome. So if you don't know a lot about evaluation, it's not a test of who are the experts. It's totally okay too. If you don't know too much, but pick a number that best reflects how you feel based on these sheep expressions and let us know what you think. So I can kind of go first since I've had the opportunity to look at the scale a couple of times, and then I'll pass it on to someone else, and we'll kind of go around the virtual room. So again, my name is Carolina. I'm an independent consultant, and in terms of which sheep I would pick, I would probably pick number 9 because it looks like it's jumping around, jumping for joy. That's how I feel about evaluation. I'm biased, as you can imagine, since I do this for my professional work. Um, but I get excited because I think it's an opportunity to think about what impacts we're making. And we go into this kind of work because we want to do good in the world. And it's a way to help us see if we are and if we're not doing the good that we hope to be doing. We will want to make some changes to change that. So that's kind of my reflection. And I'll pass it to Becky.
Good morning, everyone. We're really happy to be here with you today. Um, I'm Becky Stewart with the Improve Group and working as a team with Carolina to support end abuse and evaluation, some of their work. So let's see, these lovely sheepies. I think, well, numbers, I may relate to number 5, but number 6 is probably where I would what I'd pick for evaluation because I feel like it brings something, can bring something helpful and beautiful. And I'm thinking the flowers might be something helpful and beautiful, but just again, we're all doing work that feels important to us for the purpose of the work, and evaluation can just be a way to make sure that all that energy and effort and time is going to where you want it to go. So um, I'm going to pick the little sheep with flowers. Uh, okay, Cody, you're going to have to go up next, I think, for your sheep choice.
No worries. Good morning, everyone. My name's Cody, um, and I work at End Abuse based in Madison. And when I hear the word evaluation, I feel probably number 7 on the sheep scale. Like I know it's important. I see it's out there, but also a little nervous at like some of the things that I don't know around evaluation that seem a little overwhelming. Um, and then I will pass it to Courtney.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Courtney. I work with People Progression. I am the Youth Prevention and Evaluation Coordinator. Um, I guess if I was going to pick a sheep, it would be number 8 because I'm very new to this. It looks a little excited, a little crazy, a little overwhelmed. I'm excited to be in my role. As a person, love data and numbers and just being able to track and quantify things. So, yeah. And Mariah, I guess it's up to you.
Hi, my name is Mariah. I work at the women's community in Wausau, Wisconsin as a legal system program advocate. And when I hear the word evaluation on the sheep scale, I would say 9 roughly, which is like I'm excited, um, things like that. I just want to learn as much as I can about it, or I feel like it gives me an opportunity to get to know somebody on like a deeper level, determining on what there is that I'm evaluating.
Thanks, everyone. That's good to hear that there's overall excitement, maybe a little hesitancy here and there, but no one's like, "Oh, get this away from me." So that's definitely good to hear. Or no number fives, it puts you to sleep. So we're in good company. So now we're just going to have a short discussion on how you use evaluation already. And there is in the slide that I want to direct you to that's away from the PowerPoint. So I'm going to go ahead and put that link in the chat. Let me just label what it is because I find that to be helpful versus just the link itself. But it sounds like you, especially Mariah and Courtney, how you have some familiarity with evaluation, which is awesome. So this is just an opportunity to think a little bit about again how we use evaluation already. So there are some prompts. If you go into that slide on slide number 1. Um, there's 4 questions. It's what are some decisions that you've made about your program or organizations? What information did you use to help you make those decisions? Where did you get that information? And how did you think through it to lead to your decision? So I want to just take a couple minutes, maybe 2 to 3, since we're a smaller group, for you to think about some responses to these questions. So how evaluation has shown up in your work, in your organization, thinking about these specific responses. So to do that, if you're able, you just kind of grab a sticky note here from the left side and you drag it over to whatever you're answering, and then you can kind of just type your response into the sticky note. So let's take about 2 to 3 minutes to do that, and then we'll kind of reconvene as a small group. And now I'll need to make sure that I'm actually keeping track of the time because I like to forget to do that. take about 1 more minute and then we'll talk a little bit about what was shared on the board. Okay. As you finish up your thoughts, I'll kind of start reading some of the ones that have been shared already. So in terms of what are some decisions that you've made about your program organizations, we have how I handle walk-ins, whether or not someone is right for a certain program, types of outreach and events to connect advocates, entire program development. What do the clients actually need? Absolutely. So um, a lot around the activities there. In terms of what information did you use to help you make those decisions? One of you said key elements, information that I'm giving, feedback from other advocates, what I heard members of the communities express. Awesome. Oops. And then here at the bottom, we have advocate feedback on what's important to them in the work. Funder requirements, absolutely. That can be a driver of evaluation questions asked. Where did you get that information? So supervisor, computer and notes from training, from conversations with people, from the notes already in our system. Okay, so taking advantage of what's already available to you. Youth listserv, children and youth conference calls and funder requirements. And then how did you think through it to lead to your decision? So the level of danger, the amount of help they may have needed. And then I'll let this person finish their thought before I read out loud. Yes, absolutely. So thank you for kind of sharing some of your thought processes for these. These are, of course, really important and ultimately feed into the evaluation. So whether you know it or not, you're already kind of in that thinking space. We'll pause here for now and I'll pass it on to Becky to talk about what we've essentially started talking about already, which is really understanding what program evaluation is.
Thanks, Carolina. Do you want to leave your screen up?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, it sounds like we have some seasoned evaluation folks here. Those are great examples of evaluation and of using information. And that's really what evaluation is. We're doing it all the time, whether it's at work or in our personal lives. It's really the basic process of you want to learn something, or you're facing a decision that you need to make. So you collect some information to help you get answers to the questions or make that decision. And then you go through some process. It's interesting to see what you had there about judging what that means as an answer to your question. So you have to think about what's important or what does that information mean as you're looking at it. And that cycle is essentially evaluation. And it sounds like you've been using that in a lot of different ways with some great questions there about thinking about what's needed for folks in programs, or what kinds of activities are a good fit for the folks you're trying to reach, how to get information, or how to structure what you're doing and working with folks. So that those all sound like great uses for evaluation. So some of the what we'll also talk about a little bit today is some of the tools that that evaluation provides just to help support that process that we're familiar with. And then evaluation has some helpful tools to just help us be really thoughtful and careful in that process. So we want to make sure we're looking at the being thoughtful about what information we really need. Like we don't want to be buried under a mountain of information and then trying to figure out how that relates to the decision we're trying to make or the plans we're trying to make. So being really thoughtful or strategic about what information we need that can give us good answers to our questions. And then also thinking about how to interpret and learn from the information that we gather. So it's really easy and common for us as humans to want to just see what we want to see or ignore things that we didn't want to see or that we don't expect, or to only gather the information that's easiest to gather. And sometimes that's gets in the way of our learning. So evaluation has some tools to help us be kind of thoughtful and careful about that. And we'll just give a few insights or a few glimpses of those today. We have here some common questions that are maybe often answered using evaluation, and I heard some of these in what you're already doing here. So, what is most important to address in our work? Sometimes evaluation can help you look around and say what's are the most important needs, or what are some really great opportunities we should be taking advantage of. So, evaluation can be helpful there. For sure, I saw this, and it's a really common use of evaluation to think about improvement. So, is there a way that we can do things differently or a little bit better? Or yeah, so that's improvement is often a reason why people do evaluation. Another big one is thinking about the effect. So, what is the result of what we're doing? And so, you're intending to have some effect with your work, and is that happening? And is that the same for everybody who participates, or is it working well for some folks and not for others? And why is that? So, that's another really common and helpful use of evaluation. What helps our work be effective? I saw some notes about that on the slide that Carly and I had for you. So, like, what are some particular elements in the information that you're giving that are really important? Um, what kinds of outreach is most effective? So, that kind of really getting down to the connection between the activities that you're doing and then the results that you're seeing, and what's really helping that happen. A lot of times evaluation is used when you're in a place where you're like, we're going to expand, like we're going to go to another site, or maybe more than one person is going to start doing this activity now, or contracting, like maybe we need to cut back. We're not going to have as many hours, staff hours, or we can only do one day a week or something like that. And you have to think about what is really important to keep. And then another big question is kind of what do we need to sustain our work? So maybe, again, if you're trying to be really careful about your resources or thinking about, we want to add on something here, but what do we really need with this work to sustain the results that we're seeing? So those are all common evaluation questions, things that we can answer using evaluation and we often find helpful. Thanks, Carolina. So this is the evaluation cycle, and this is probably makes a lot of sense, might remind you of research projects at school or something like that. But I think one thing to point out is that it keeps going around. So evaluation is, we just looked at all those different questions. When you have a new question, you start the evaluation process and you learn something from that, and then maybe you have a different question. So you can always keep going around the wheel of evaluation here and learning something new, and then figuring out that you've got another question to answer. So if we start at kind of noon or 1 o'clock here, thinking about the purpose of evaluation, that's really helpful or important because there's all sorts of questions that you can answer, as we just talked about, and all kinds of information you can gather, and you can easily sort of be buried with that. So really being clear about what you're hoping to learn, what is your purpose, and then the questions that you have or what you want to answer. Developing those questions really helps you kind of get on the right path and be thinking clearly about where you're headed with your evaluation. Sometimes it's helpful to think about like what do you want to say at the end of your evaluation? So you can kind of play that out a little bit. Like, I really want to be able to say that we need to have one full-time staff at least 3 days a week for this program. And so that kind of helps you understand again where you're headed with your evaluation and what you're trying to learn. So after you kind of get clear about what you're trying to learn and what questions you're trying to answer, then you think about how your methods, how you're going to gather your data. One point that Carlina and I wanted to try to reinforce today is just that so often when people think of evaluation, they think of surveys, and we think of that little one of those sheeps could have been a survey, but there's lots of ways to gather information. So we want to be creative and thoughtful about what's a good fit for your questions and the context that you're working in. Then you actually get the data and gather it and analyze it and then interpret it. Interpreting, thinking about what's important, what meaning do you make of data? There's a lot of different ways to interpret data. And that's a really important step in evaluation, is because you're making a judgment about what's important and what's meaningful. And then improvement. So how do you apply what you've learned to make improvements? And I'll just make a note here that a lot of our field has been doing a lot of thinking about and soul searching about how to get better, about how we can, as a field, be advancing equity in our work. And a couple of places here that I'll lift up are really important is where you're trying to think about what's important to look at, why you're doing the evaluation, that purpose and the questions that you're going to answer, and as well as the point of interpreting what's important. One of a great method there is to involve people who are going to be affected by the evaluation. That helps make sure that it's going to be used, and it also can give you some really important insights about what's important to look at and what meaning you're making of the data. And there's a lot of different perspectives that can be helpful there. So involving those who are affected is kind of a really critical spot there to help advance equity. And then another thing, if you think about maybe what methods you're going to use and how you're going to share the information that you learned all along here, but it's throughout the cycle, is helpful to be thinking about the community or the context that that this is taking place in. So there might be some methods that would make sense in one community, and then you would try them somewhere else, and they really don't fit well. It's not how people prefer to share information. It doesn't fit with how folks are kind of operating, the time they have, how they think about the issue. So just that importance to be responsive to the community and the culture and context that you're doing the evaluation is really important there too. All right. Well, I'm going to take just a minute here, and this is a time if you can kind of stay off camera and just have a little reflection to yourself. But the question that we're thinking of is, what does exploring questions to learn about how things are going mean to me personally? So just kind of thinking about that cycle of learning, of having a question and looking for an answer to it and learning about how things are going. What does that mean to me? And you can just in your reflection think about an image, a poem, a song, a spiritual reference. You can find something around you that you could use to think about an answer to this question. But what does it mean, that cycle of exploring questions to learn how things are going? So we'll give you a minute just to have a little reflection here. All right, I'm just belatedly catching up with the chat. Hopefully you looked at some slides and weren't just staring at me the whole time. Did anyone come up with maybe a word or an image or some other reference or thing that describes how they feel about that kind of learning process, exploring questions. You can put it in the chat or share with your voice.
For me, with it being a circle, a cycle, it makes me think of continuous improvement. It's not a linear thing. You're never getting to the end of it, and that's all the more you're ever going to get.
Yeah. Good one, Courtney.
I can share. I think maybe Cody might have heard this story because I shared it in a similar presentation once. But when I first saw this question, it made me think of about a song that the name of which I don't know, and I can't remember how it goes, but I remember how it made me feel. So when my husband and I were about to get married, we got together with the church organist, pianist, musician person. His name was Kenny, to talk about what songs we wanted for when the bride walked in, when we exited, kind of all these things. And he kept playing a couple different songs, some of them that I'd heard before, some that I hadn't. And none of them like felt right. Um, but he all of a sudden said, he's like, "This is a weird flex, but can I play an original song for you?" And I was like, "Sure, like I'm open to anything." And he played this song that kind of reminded me of Bilbo Baggins. I've never even seen Lord of the Rings, but like the image of I got was of Bilbo Baggins saying, "I'm going on an adventure," because that's how the song made me feel, like we're going on an adventure. Um, and that's how I feel about evaluation. It's an opportunity to kind of go on an adventure and see, you don't know what you're going to get at the end, but you kind of go on this journey to find out what people's experiences were, what the impact was, etc. And hopefully at the end you get to something good, not something bad, because an adventure can end either way. But it was just that feeling that I really connected with. And I wish I remembered what the song sounded like, because that's what I walked down the aisle to, but I don't. But I remember how it made me feel, which is the most important part.
Thanks, Carolina.
Uh, Um, I think for me, especially thinking about just like this work, of like so many times being told no, but like still asking the questions to find out the yes. Um, and especially when working with victims and survivors and having to like work on their schedules, with the resources that are accessible to them. So, um, definitely feeling of like resourcefulness and like curiosity.
So when I look at this question, it makes me feel like there's always more to learn. Um, ask questions because sometimes a lot of people don't feel comfortable asking questions. So if you ask questions, it may be a question that they wanted answers to. So just always been open minded.
Thanks, everybody. Yeah, I mean, I was going in the way back machine when um, what got me into evaluation was I was working in a nonprofit, and um, it's as you know, it's like long hours and hard work, um, and I was worried, or I felt worried about whether is this, are we all just getting our paycheck and going doing the programs, or is this really what's most important to be needed, and why the nonprofit did housing things and job training things, and was thinking like what's really needed and what's actually helping people, and are we just kind of doing the things because that's what's already been always been done, or is what's really um, important to do. So that's what and it worried me that we would just be kind of going and clocking in and collecting our paycheck and not but we're all there because we wanted to see things change, but was what we were doing actually going to cause that change? So that's kind of what got me into evaluation. Well, thanks for sharing that. So I think that's a great transition, Carlina, for the next things to why to evaluate. So there's a lot of different reasons to evaluate. We can have kind of telling our story. So a lot of times we need to explain kind of why, why the program exists, why it's important, what to, what are the differences that are made by what we're doing. Reflecting. So just use and you're as your own profession and you're thinking about your work and being able to think about that again, that cycle of continuous improvement, how to best use the opportunities you have or the time you have, what's really working. So that kind of reflection process for yourself. That improvement, making things better. Maybe you have a feeling or you're seeing that things are not going as you hope they would go and you want to know how to make things better. Another uh, reason to do evaluation is maybe creating a learning community. So maybe there's others in other organizations or within your own organization, they're all trying to do similar things and you want to be learning together. Like what are some good ways to do this? What's something that's better than something else? Can we learn about like more deeply, like what are the deeper causes that we can be paying attention to? So just kind of creating a learning community. Is important these days about building support to kind of get people excited about your work and build support for the program. And that can be with people that you're hoping will participate. So they can be like, yeah, I want to go check that out because I've heard that it's effective, that it's a good thing to do. Or maybe partners who you want to be referring people to you, or you want to refer people to them, like you want to build support for your program. That they think it's helpful and want to be connected to it. And of course, funders as well. Maybe influencing others is another thing. Maybe you need to influence people. We've had people use evaluation findings like at the legislature, things to say like, this is really important work. This is something you should pay attention to. Policy changes that are needed. And then planning for sustainability. I gave a couple examples earlier about maybe there's some times when you're thinking about how do we really focus in on what's most important to keep for sustaining our program. And a lot of times, as you can imagine, there's multiple reasons, several of these reasons why you might be doing a single evaluation. So it's not just one reason at a time. So one question that Carlina and I had for you today is just as we were talking with Cody about like, oh, what would be helpful for this group to hear about, or what kinds of things might they do with evaluation? And so that's one place we wanted to pause and ask what, if any of these reasons for doing evaluation feel more important to you, or what feels really important right now in terms of use of evaluation. Are there any of these that particularly resonate of like, oh, yes, that feels like a really important reason to do evaluation right now, or does one stand out to you?
I would say influencing others, building support. Building support is like really a big one because like working with victims, they really need that support. So that's always something good to have. Making things better. That is our main goal, is to make things better, at least even if it's just for the day or for the long run. If that's something that we work towards, are like ones I feel that are really important when evaluating.
Thank you.
For me, I agree with a lot of what she just said. Obviously, making things better. As my role as a youth advocate, I definitely want to foster a community for learning. I believe that youth are such a sponge and they just need the right examples in their life to help them learn the right way. And again, building supports. A lot of the youth I'm working with are survivors already at such a young age. So just making sure they know they have a place where they are supported if they feel like nothing else in their life supports them.
Thank you. All right, Carlina, I think I'll turn it over to you to get into the how of evaluation.
Yes. All right, we've got a little bit under 20 minutes left, so if I go a little quickly through these, just apologies in advance, but you'll have the recording available as a resource to follow up on in the future if needed. But yes, we're going to talk a little bit about how to actually evaluate. And as Becky alluded to a little bit earlier in the presentation, there's many different types of tools that people use for program evaluation, and we're just going to talk about a few of the common ones today. Um, this is just kind of a taste. And after this, if you want to talk a little bit more about what other resources or support for evaluation you need, definitely let us know so that we can offer that to you. And I'll actually make a correction to on this slide. I forgot to remove the second one, the primary prevention principles. We won't be going over those today, just the evaluation planning and logic models. So this is the same visual that you saw a couple of moments ago. So after you decide why you are evaluating, so the purpose, that should lead you into saying what you want to learn or what questions you want to answer. So once you've done some reflection on that, you figure out what information you need and where or who has that information. And your methods, your evaluation methods are the way of getting that information that you actually need. It's important to to keep in mind that you want to be thoughtful that these are all aligned. So, will your methods give you the information you need to answer your questions? Will your questions serve your purpose? And you can write this all down in a written evaluation plan, something as simple as a table, which I'll show in a moment. But you want to make sure that these are all aligned because you can spend a lot of time and resources. And if you end up with evaluation questions and methods that don't help answer those questions, then unfortunately, uh, the information you will get will not be very useful. So here's just like a very simple example of how you can lay out your thoughts for an evaluation plan. So let's say we're in a situation where our drop-in after-school tutoring program has to cut down our time with participants from 3 days a week to 2 days a week. We want to know what we should keep and what we can let go of. And that can be the purpose of the evaluation to help you make that decision. So you'd want to think about what questions do we need to answer? And you can come up with some different options. And for this example, we'll pick one, which in this case is what activities are most effective for participants, which you can see in the first column of the table. Then you think about what would be some ways to collect data that would be a good fit. And generally, it's good to have a mix of data sources since none give you a full picture. But again, that will be dependent on the amount of time and resources you have to collect that data or what existing data you have that can be supportive. So a couple of ideas for this example, in this example, are school records for attendance. That's information that already exists. You wouldn't really have to do a whole lot to acquire it because the school's already tracking that. And then you could potentially collect some data from students and teachers. So for example, to choose a method with the teachers, we were thinking about the fact that they're always pressed for time, they have different availability during the day, and we need feedback on individual student improvement. That's probably not appropriate to share beyond the teacher student, which is why a survey might work in that situation. And then for the students, you might ask yourselves, especially as individuals that work with youth regularly, how have you seen youth most at ease sharing information? What would they enjoy? Would something like a survey work? Would something more interactive work? So those are some things to think about as you are choosing your methods, because not every method works for every population, every context, every age group. You kind of have to adapt to your audience. So moving on, we're going to talk about something called a logic model. Um, and this is just kind of another way to help organize your thoughts about uh, the evaluation. So a logic model describes what a program does and what changes are expected as a result of the program. It can be used as a quick visual description of the program and why it exists, so what change it makes in the world. And they're often used as the foundation of an evaluation. They help you be clear about the connection between activities and the effects you're hoping they have, so the quote unquote logic of what causes what. And they can help to show where you have assumptions about what is needed or how change happens. An evaluation can help test to see what is actually true, and the logic model can help your evaluation stay focused on what is relevant and meaningful to ask about your program. One of the challenges with evaluation, especially in the initial stages, is you can get very excited about all the possibilities, and we want to learn this and that. So staying focused becomes really important because things can uh, get too unwieldy very quickly if we're not careful. So I'll quickly kind of go over the different components of the logic model. As you see here, we have the program goals, which are just the overarching goals of the program, resources, activities, outputs, and outcomes, and I'll go through each of those in a moment. And then at the very bottom, we have impact, assumptions, historical factors, and external influences. So resources, sometimes called inputs, are what we use to run our program. So there are things like staff time, funding, space and facilities, technology, incentives, food, the pretty tangible things that you need to actually deliver the program without getting into the activities quite yet. Then we have the activities themselves, which are the actions that are needed to implement your program. So what you will do with the program resources in order to achieve those program program outcomes and ultimately the program goals. So here you would think through the entire participant process, from enrollment, what do you do when you work together, to any follow up activities afterwards. Then we have our outputs, and those are what are created as an immediate result of an activity taking place. So they're the things that come directly from doing the activity and are often closely linked with your activities and are worded as number of XYZ. So for example, if one of your activities is holding a training, the related output could be the number of people that were actually trained. So not how the training impacted them, but just how many people actually participated in the training. Another example is that if your activity is holding some sort of youth session, your output could be the number of youth sessions that you actually held. And then we have our outcomes, and these describe what happened as a result of your program. So outcomes are the changes that occur or the difference that is made for individuals, groups, families, organizations, systems, or communities during or after the program. And outcomes answer the question, what difference does the program make? What does success look like? And they reflect the core achievements you hope for your program. And outcomes are often divided into short-term, medium-term, and long-term outcomes, which I'll describe shortly. But before I describe them, I wanted to talk a little bit about the fact that you can link pieces of logic models to the elements of the Black Women's Blueprint recommended socio-ecological model of prevention. Maybe some of you have heard of the model before, but in short, the model expands on the Center for Disease Control's socio-ecological model of prevention by using a Black feminist lens. So it essentially adds that there are structural, historical, environmental, and spiritual factors that affect us in our health that go beyond just the individual actions or relationships or even those in community and society. And I'm just sharing this as a reference. We won't go too deep into it, but I'm putting in the chat now a link to kind of the full report and description for you to check out when you have an opportunity. So the reason I mentioned this model is because we can map pieces of the logic model to elements of the Black Women's Blueprint culturally specific model. So starting with short-term outcomes, those are usually defined as changes on the individual or relational level, or in learning, knowledge, attitudes, skills, or beliefs, which is kind of stands out with the little square here on the screen. And short-term outcomes can map the individual and relational elements of the blueprint model. Then we have medium-term outcomes, which are usually defined as changes on relational or communal level. So changes in action, behavior, decisions, or practices. And these can be mapped on to the relational and communal elements of the Black women's blueprint model. Again, the little square kind of indicates where those are on the model. And then we have the long-term outcomes, which are usually defined as changes on a societal, structural, or environmental levels. So changes in condition, policies, laws, climate norms, or expectations. And long-term outcomes can map to the societal, structural, and environmental parts of the blueprint model. And then finally, we have the historical factors, external influences, and perhaps assumptions of the logic model that can map similarly to the societal, structural, historical, and environmental and spiritual parts of the Black women's blueprint model. And as you can see, there's kind of a blue line that runs throughout the entirety of the model. So the spiritual level can run through any level of outcomes or external factors, not necessarily just beyond environmental. And then finally, before I open it up to Q&A, because I know we have only about 6 minutes left, I just want to share quickly some examples of ways logic models can take forms, from very linear to very nonlinear and artistic. So here's an example of a linear not logic model. The pieces are laid out in list form from left to right. This is often how templates look like. A lot of us that have received a lot, evaluation training, this is kind of the quote unquote traditional logic model format that we are taught, but it's not the only way. This is another example from the End Abuse program. So as you can see, their logic model is very artistic and uses metaphor to describe the different elements of the model and how they interact. So in this case, the rays of sunshine are the resources and activities, and they feed the seeds here on the bottom left, which are the short-term outcomes. Then the seeds grow into the sprouts, which are the medium-term outcomes in purple. And then finally, the sprout grows into the tree here on the right, which are the long-term outcomes. So a very beautiful way to represent the same kind of information we've been talking about. And then finally, this example of another nonlinear logic model. So this is from the model for Kateri Residence, which was a temporary home for Indigenous and Native American women recovering from drug addiction. They chose to create their logic model in the shape of a medicine wheel or native healing circle, which is a symbol recognizing the various aspects of health and interconnectedness of all things. So again, just another example. And we had an activity planned for you, but time always goes by too quickly. So we're not going to get to it. But in these last couple of minutes, just wanted to open it up to Cody, Courtney, and Mariah on whether you have any overarching questions for us, or whether there's any resources that you think would be helpful that we can send you after this.
I don't think it's like a specific resource, but like any resources that you think would be good or appropriate, I'm all for it because it might be something that we don't have. And then if so, that's okay if it is as well. It's just good to know that we all on the same page. As far as questions, I don't have any questions. Thank you for the presentation. It was really good. I got a lot of information and just a deeper understanding of like evaluating things as well. So thank you.
Thanks, Mariah. And thank you, Courtney. I see your comment in the chat as well.
And I just also wanted to mention too that I think one of the reasons that I get very excited with evaluation and is that like when you have that data, it's and especially directly from the people you're serving, it's really hard for those that have differing ideas of you for how services should go. So, for example, really quickly, there's a during the Walker administration, we got a lot of pushback for the way that we wanted to do prevention work. And so we would be doing these different evaluations of just like open discussions, taking notes, sometimes, focus, like having very intentional focus conversations, and then being able to bring that data back when funders or other people in the or colleagues in the organization are hesitant to move in the same way. And like, are you sure they're using, or like, are youth really saying that? And it's like, yes, they are. Here's word for word what they were saying, or like here are the themes tying in. So it's really hard for folks to really push back when we have the actual evaluation and the actual responses from the people that we're serving as well.
Thanks, Cody. Becky, any final thoughts?
No, I appreciate this. I think if appreciate the time and your good contributions, Mariah and Courtney. So if there's I think one of the thoughts about us coming is if we weren't quite sure what would be helpful, but if you find yourself thinking like, oh, I'd really like some assistance setting up an evaluation or some ideas about how to get this better data than I've got on this or something like that, we can come back or we can send something, through Cody to keep that line of communication open to see what would be helpful to share. So it's an honor to be with you, and yeah, hopefully evaluation is useful to you in the future too.
Yes, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Cody, for having us.